The transport ship came out of warp space with a soft hum and began its slow approach toward Station 7. Inside the ship, 5 young humans sat in their seats and looked through the windows at the massive structure floating in the darkness of space. The station was bigger than anything they had ever seen. It stretched for miles in every direction, covered with lights and docking bays and communication towers that blinked in patterns they did not understand. Danny Cole sat near the back of the group. He was 22 years old with short brown hair and calm eyes that took in everything around him without showing much emotion. He had joined the Earth Military Corps at 18 and had spent 4 years training for this moment. When the Galactic Union had finally agreed to accept human cadets into their famous military academy, Danny had been one of the first to volunteer. The other 4 humans on the ship were just as eager. There was Morgan, a tall woman with red hair who had grown up on a farm in Nebraska before joining the military. Next to her sat 2 brothers named Pete, and both of them built like fighters with broad shoulders and quick smiles. The last member of their group was a quiet young woman named Woods, who had graduated at the top of her class in tactical studies. None of them knew what to expect. The Galactic Union had been watching humanity for decades before making first contact. They had studied human history, human biology, and human behavior. Based on their research, they had decided that humans were a young and fragile species with limited potential. The invitation to join the academy was more of a gesture of goodwill than a real expectation of success. The transport docked at Bay 12, and the 5 humans gathered their bags and walked down the ramp into the station. The air smelled different here, filtered and recycled through systems that had been running for centuries. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth, just enough to notice but not enough to cause problems. Waiting for them at the bottom of the ramp were 2 alien beings unlike anything Danny had ever seen in person. The first was a massive reptilian creature that stood nearly 8 feet tall. His scales were the color of burnt iron, and his yellow eyes moved slowly as he studied each human in turn. This was Sergeant of the species, and he had been training soldiers at this academy for 30 years. The second alien was smaller but no less intimidating. She had 4 arms and a body covered in hard black plates like armor. Her head was shaped like an insect, with large compound eyes that seemed to look in every direction at once. Wings folded against her back rustled slightly as she moved. This was Sergeant of the, and she was known throughout the Union for her strict methods and zero tolerance for failure. Looked at his and then back at the humans. His voice was deep and rough when he spoke. 5 cadets, humans, first group to ever attend this academy. Clicked her mandibles together in a sound that might have been laughter. They looked tired already. The warp transit must have affected them. Danny heard the comment but said nothing. He simply stood at attention and waited. Stepped closer to the group. I am Sergeant. This is Sergeant. We will be your primary instructors during your time at this academy. The orientation program you will complete is designed to test your physical abilities, your mental capabilities, and your readiness for real combat situations. This program normally takes 1 standard week to complete. He paused and looked at his again. However, because of your species' limitations, we have extended your schedule. You will have additional rest periods and modified training exercises. We do not expect you to perform at the same level as other cadets. We only expect you to try your best. Morgan shifted slightly beside Danny. He could feel the tension in the group. They had not traveled across the galaxy to be treated like children. Cadets, continued, you will be assigned quarters and given today to recover from transit. Training begins at first cycle tomorrow. Danny raised his hand, stopped talking and stared at him with those cold yellow eyes. Sergeant, Danny said in a clear voice, with respect, we do not need recovery time. We slept through the entire jump. We are ready to begin training now. Made that clicking sound again. Human biology requires extended rest after warp transit. Your species is highly susceptible to temporal displacement sickness. This is documented in Union medical files. Maybe some humans, Danny replied. But we trained for this. We prepared ourselves. We are fine. And exchanged a look that Danny could not read. The reptilian sergeant seemed almost amused by the human's confidence. Very well, said slowly. If you wish to begin today, we will not stop you. But understand this, Cadet. The training you are about to face was designed for species far stronger and more durable than yours. Many cadets from other worlds fail these tests. If you push yourself too hard, you will break, and we will not slow down to help you. Danny nodded, understood, Sergeant. Turned and began walking toward a large doorway at the far end of the hangar. Follow me, all of you. The 5 humans picked up their bags and followed. As they walked through the station, Danny noticed other aliens watching them from doorways and windows. Some of them pointed and whispered to each other. A few of them laughed openly at the sight of the small, soft-skinned creatures who thought they could train alongside the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Danny ignored them all. He had faced doubt before. Back on Earth, his instructors had told him he was too small to be a soldier. His classmates had said he was too quiet, too calm, not aggressive enough. But Danny had learned long ago that the people who talked the most were usually the ones who accomplished the least. He preferred to let his actions speak for him. The group reached a large room filled with training equipment. Screens on the walls displayed information in languages Danny did not recognize. Other cadets from different species were already training, their bodies moving through exercises that looked impossible. Stopped and turned to face the humans. This is Training Hall 7. You will spend most of your time here during orientation. The program consists of 5 modules: physical conditioning, weapons familiarization, tactical theory, environmental adaptation, combat simulation. Each module is designed to take 1 full standard day. You have been given 7 days to complete all 5. He looked directly at Danny. Do you still wish to begin today? Danny met his gaze without flinching. Yes, Sergeant. Nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes now, something that looked almost like curiosity. Then let us see what humans are truly made of. He gestured toward the first training area. Physical conditioning begins now. The physical conditioning module was designed to break the bodies of even the strongest cadets. Sergeant had seen warriors from a dozen species collapse during this test. He had watched beings with 4 legs, beings with armored skin, and beings with muscles 3 times denser than human tissue fall to their knees and beg for rest. He expected the humans to last perhaps an hour before they realized their mistake. The course began with a simple obstacle run through a series of chambers with variable gravity. One room would have gravity twice as heavy as Earth normal. The next would have almost no gravity at all. Cadets had to adapt quickly or they would slam into walls and ceilings, breaking bones and losing precious time. Danny entered the first chamber and immediately felt the weight press down on his shoulders. Every step was like walking through thick mud. His muscles burned within minutes. Behind him, he could hear the other humans struggling to keep up. Morgan was the first to fall. The gravity shift caught her off guard, and she tumbled forward into a wall. Pete and made it through 2 more chambers before their bodies gave out. Woods lasted longer than the others, her small frame proving surprisingly resilient, but even she collapsed at the 60% mark. Danny kept moving. His legs screamed at him to stop. His lungs felt like they were filled with fire. Every part of his body was telling him that he had reached his limit, that he needed to rest, that continuing would cause permanent damage. But Danny had learned something during his years of training on Earth. The body always quit before the mind did. Pain was just information. Exhaustion was just a feeling. Neither of them had to control him unless he let them. He pushed through chamber after chamber. The obstacles grew more difficult. Walls that shifted and moved. Floors covered in ice that made every step treacherous. Metal surfaces that burned hot enough to blister skin. Danny adapted to each one, finding his balance, controlling his breathing, refusing to let his body stop. watched from the observation deck with growing disbelief. Beside him had stopped making her clicking sounds. Both sergeants stood in silence as the human cadet crossed the final threshold and stumbled out of the course. Danny was breathing hard. His uniform was soaked with sweat. Burns and bruises covered his arms and legs, but he was standing. He looked up at the observation deck and waited. Checked the numbers made no sense. "Your time," he said slowly, "is faster than the average." They were a species known for their incredible physical strength. They had dominated this course for decades. A human had no business even coming close to their times. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. "What is next?" Stepped forward, her compound eyes focused entirely on the human below. "You should rest. Your cardiovascular system cannot sustain this pace. If you continue, you will cause permanent damage to your body." "Sergeant," Danny replied, "on Earth, we have athletes who run for 26 miles without stopping. We have soldiers who train for 3 days straight without sleep. I appreciate your concern, but I did not come across the galaxy to take naps." Felt something stir in his chest. It was not quite respect, not yet, but it was something close. "Very well. The weapons familiarization module is next. Follow me." The weapons familiarization module was designed to take an entire day because alien weapon systems required neural calibration. Each weapon had to sync with the user's brain patterns, and human neural pathways were considered too primitive for rapid integration. The Union scientists had estimated that humans would need at least 12 hours just to achieve basic functionality with the simplest weapons. Danny adapted to the pulse rifle in 40 minutes. The weapon felt strange in his hands at first. It hummed with energy and seemed to pulse against his palms like a living thing. The neural interface sent strange sensations through his skull, probing and testing and searching for connection. Danny relaxed and let it happen. He did not fight the technology. He simply opened his mind and allowed the weapon to find its own path. Within minutes, he was hitting targets at the far end of the range with perfect accuracy. Observed every shot. This is not possible. The calibration process alone should take 6 hours. Danny said nothing. He simply picked up the next weapon. The plasma caster took an hour to master. It was heavier than the rifle and required a different kind of mental focus. The energy it produced was more volatile, more dangerous. One wrong thought could cause the weapon to overload and explode in the user's hands. Danny learned to quiet his mind. He pushed away every distraction, every fear, every stray thought until there was nothing left but the weapon and the target. When he fired, the plasma bolt flew straight and true. The blade was the hardest. This weapon required precise mental control to activate. It was not enough to simply hold the blade and swing it. The user had to think the blade into existence, to shape the gravitational field with pure willpower. Danny picked up the handle and focused. Nothing happened. He tried again, still nothing. Watched with something like satisfaction. The blade has defeated many cadets. There is no shame in moving on. Danny ignored him. He closed his eyes and reached deeper into himself, searching for something he could not name. The handle grew warm in his grip. He felt a tingling sensation in his fingertips. The blade flickered to life for half a second before vanishing. Danny opened his eyes and looked at the handle. Then he closed his eyes and tried again. It took him 90 minutes and 3 minor burns on his hands before he finally mastered the weapon. The blade hummed with stable energy, extending 2 feet from the handle and glowing with a soft blue light. Danny moved through basic forms, testing the weight and balance, learning how the blade responded to his thoughts. When he was finished, he deactivated the weapon and looked up at the sergeants. "What is next?" And exchanged another look. This time there was no amusement in their eyes, only confusion and something that looked almost like fear. "The tactical theory module," said quietly, "but first I must make a report." He stepped away and activated his communication device. "Academy Director, this is Sergeant. I need you to run full biological scans on one of the human cadets. There is something wrong with him. He is not performing within expected parameters." The response came back immediately. "Define not within expected parameters." Looked down at Danny Cole, who had already moved to the tactical training area and was studying the holographic displays there. "He has completed 2 modules in 6 hours. At this rate, he will finish the entire week-long program before the day cycle ends." There was silence on the other end of the communication. Then the director spoke again. "I am on my way." Academy Director arrived at Training Hall 7 within the hour. She was unlike any being Danny had ever seen. Her body was made entirely of crystal, thousands of tiny fragments that floated together in the rough shape of a humanoid figure. Light pulsed through her form in slow waves, changing color as she moved. She had overseen military training at this academy for 300 years, and in all that time, she had never received a report quite like this one. She floated toward the observation deck where and waited. Below them, Danny Cole sat at a tactical training station, absorbing information at a pace that made no sense. "Show me the data," said. Handed her his. She studied it in silence for a long moment. The numbers told a story that contradicted everything the Galactic Union believed about human beings. "Run the biological scans," she ordered. The scans took 30 minutes. Medical drones circled Danny as he continued his tactical training, analyzing every aspect of his body down to the cellular level. They measured his brain activity, his hormone levels, his muscle density, his bone structure, and 100 other factors that might explain his impossible performance. The results came back completely normal. "His cellular structure shows nothing remarkable," announced. "Standard human genome, no genetic modifications, no cybernetic enhancements, no chemical augmentation of any kind." Clicked her mandibles in frustration. "Then how is he doing this? No species we have ever encountered can adapt this quickly." Form pulsed with soft blue light as she considered the question. "Tell me what you know about human evolution, Sergeant." Shrugged his massive shoulders. "They evolved on a mid-gravity world, carbon-based life, oxygen breathing, relatively short compared to most species, nothing remarkable by galactic standards." "Nothing remarkable," repeated. "That is what we all believed, but I think we have made a serious error in our assessment." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth and its history. "Humans evolved on what they call their planet has extreme temperature variations that shift from burning heat to freezing cold. It has constant seismic activity and volcanic eruptions. Predators exist on every landmass. Diseases and parasites fill the air and water. By all logical standards, intelligent life should never have developed there." Watched the display with growing interest. "We knew some of this." "You knew the facts," replied. "You did not understand what they meant." She changed the display to show human physiological data. "Most species in the galaxy evolved to survive through specific advantages. The developed armored scales and incredible strength. The gained flight and enhanced sensory organs. The built massive bodies that could withstand almost any physical trauma. But humans evolved with no natural weapons at all. No claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. They were soft, weak, and slow compared to the predators they faced." "Then how did they survive?" asked. "Through 2 things that we completely underestimated." Pointed at Danny, who had just completed another tactical examination with a perfect score. "Adaptation and persistence." She brought up more data on the display. "Human beings have an incredible ability to adapt to almost any environment. They can survive in deserts, jungles, frozen wastelands, and high mountains. They can eat almost anything. Their bodies can adjust to changes in temperature, pressure, and gravity faster than any species we have studied. But more importantly, they have something else. Something that we do not fully understand." "What?" asked. the ability to ignore their own limitations. Enlarged a section of the display showing human brain chemistry. When humans face extreme stress, their bodies produce chemical compounds that allow them to push beyond what should be physically possible. They call this adrenaline, but it is more than that. It is an entire biological system designed to suppress pain, delay exhaustion, and maintain function even when the body is failing. Studied the data with her compound eyes. Many species have stress responses. Not like this, replied. Most species evolved stress responses that tell them to flee from danger or fight briefly and then retreat. Humans evolved to chase their prey for days without rest until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They call this persistence hunting. Their bodies were not designed to win quick battles. They were designed to outlast everything. Below them, Danny had finished the tactical theory module. He stood up from his station and stretched his arms, then looked around for the next challenge. Felt a strange sensation in his chest. He has been awake for 14 hours. He has completed 3 modules that should have taken 3 days, and he is still going. Because he refuses to stop, said quietly. His body is telling him that he is exhausted. His muscles are damaged. His energy reserves are depleted, but his mind is overriding all of that information. He has decided that he will not quit, and so he will not quit. Made a sound that was almost like a whisper. This is terrifying. Yes, agreed, it is. She turned to face both sergeants. We have treated humans as a weak and fragile species because they look weak and fragile, but we made a mistake. Humans do not survive by being the strongest or the fastest. They survive by refusing to die. They push through pain that would kill other beings. They keep fighting when any logical creature would surrender. They simply do not stop. On the training floor, Danny walked toward the environmental adaptation area. He had been awake for most of a day, had pushed his body beyond what should have been possible, and showed no signs of giving up. Turned to the director. What do we do? Watched the human with something that looked like fascination mixed with concern. We let him continue. We watch. We learn. And we prepare ourselves for the possibility that everything we believed about humanity was wrong. She floated toward the edge of the observation deck. I will be monitoring from my office. Contact me immediately if anything changes. And Sergeant. Yes, Director. Send a preliminary report to Union Command. They need to know what we are witnessing here. If this human is not an anomaly, if other members of his species share these traits, then the galaxy may be changing in ways we did not anticipate. Nodded slowly. Below him, Danny Cole began the environmental adaptation module, walking calmly toward a chamber that had broken cadets from species 10 times stronger than any human. The sergeant had trained soldiers for 3 decades. He had seen bravery and cowardice, strength and weakness, success and failure. But he had never seen anything quite like this. For the first time in years, did not know what was going to happen next. The environmental adaptation module was designed to break cadets. That was not an exaggeration or a figure of speech. The module existed specifically to push beings to their absolute limits and then push them further until they either learned to adapt or they shattered. Candidates were exposed to a series of chambers simulating the most hostile environments in the known galaxy. Extreme cold that could freeze blood in minutes. Extreme heat that could boil water instantly. Toxic atmospheres that attacked the lungs with every breath. Crushing pressure that made movement feel impossible. Zero-gravity combat conditions that disoriented even the most experienced fighters. Most cadets took an entire day to complete this module because they needed rest between chambers. Their bodies required time to recover from each brutal test before facing the next one. The alien instructors expected this. They had designed the module with recovery periods built into the schedule. Danny Cole had no intention of resting. Word had spread through Station 7 that something strange was happening in Training Hall 7. A human cadet was attempting to complete the entire orientation program in a single day. Most aliens laughed when they heard this. Humans were considered one of the weakest species in the Union. The idea of one finishing the legendary training in less than a week seemed absurd. But as the hours passed and reports continued to come in, the laughter stopped. Aliens began gathering at observation windows around the environmental adaptation chambers. Off-duty instructors abandoned their rest periods to watch. Cadets from a dozen different species pressed against barriers and stared at the small human who refused to quit. The cold chamber was first. Danny entered through an airlock and immediately felt the temperature drop. His breath crystallized in front of his face. The moisture on his skin turned to frost within seconds. He was wearing only the standard training uniform, a thin fabric that provided almost no protection against the cold. The chamber's target was at the center, a simple navigation puzzle that required steady hands and clear thinking. Most cadets lasted 3 to 4 minutes before their bodies started shutting down. Hypothermia set in quickly at these temperatures. Fingers stopped working. Thoughts became slow and confused. Danny lasted 12 minutes. He moved through the cold with deliberate steps, forcing his legs to keep working even as they screamed at him to stop. His hands shook so badly that he could barely grip the puzzle pieces, but he refused to let that stop him. He completed the navigation task with numb fingers and walked to the exit on legs that had nearly stopped responding. When he emerged from the chamber, was waiting. Your core temperature dropped to dangerous levels. Medical protocols require that you rest before continuing. Danny shook his head. His lips were blue and his whole body trembled, but his eyes remained clear. What is next? The heat chamber followed. The air inside was hot enough to cause instant pain. Danny felt his skin start to burn the moment he entered. The uniform clung to his body, soaked with sweat that evaporated almost as fast as it formed. His lungs ached with every breath of superheated air. The target this time was a series of buttons that had to be pressed in a specific sequence. Each button was at a different height and position, requiring Danny to move through the hottest parts of the chamber. He emerged with mild burns on his hands and arms. The medical drones descended on him immediately, treating the wounds with foam that cooled his skin. Danny barely noticed. He was already walking toward the next chamber. The toxic atmosphere module pushed him to his knees twice. The gas inside the chamber attacked his respiratory system the moment he removed his helmet. That was the test. Cadets had to complete a combat scenario while breathing poison that slowly destroyed their ability to function. Those with natural resistance to toxins could last for hours. Humans had no such resistance. Danny fell after 6 minutes. He got back up. He fell again after 8 minutes. He got back up again. His eyes were red and streaming with tears. Blood dripped from his nose. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. But he completed the scenario. He defeated every drone target, solved every puzzle, and reached the exit just before his body would have shut down completely. The pressure chamber left him bleeding from his ears. Inside, the gravity was 12 times Earth normal. Moving felt like swimming through concrete. Every step required tremendous effort. Danny's joints screamed in protest. His spine compressed under the weight. The target was simple: walk from one end of the chamber to the other. Many cadets could not even stand in these conditions. Danny not only stood but walked the entire distance, one agonizing step at a time. When he emerged, blood ran from his ears and nose. The pressure had ruptured small vessels throughout his body. He looked like he had been in a brutal fight. "You need medical attention," said. There was something new in her voice. It was not pity or contempt. It was something closer to respect. "After I finish," Danny replied. His voice was hoarse and weak, but his words were clear. The zero-gravity combat section was the final test of the module. Danny floated into the chamber and immediately lost his orientation. Up and down had no meaning here. His body tumbled slowly in space as he tried to figure out which way was which. 3 combat drones activated and began firing stun bolts at him. For the first few minutes, Danny was helpless. The drones hit him again and again as he struggled to control his movement. His body spun and flipped in ways that made his stomach churn. Every attempt to move pushed him in directions he did not expect. But Danny was learning. Every mistake taught him something. Every collision with walls, every miscalculated trajectory, every missed shot added to his understanding. He began to use the walls to redirect his movement. He started predicting where the drones would be instead of reacting after they appeared. By the end of the hour, he was moving like he had trained in zero gravity his entire life. The drones could not touch him. He flew through the chamber with deadly precision, destroying each target with controlled bursts from his weapon. When he emerged from the final chamber, the observation deck was completely silent. Hundreds of aliens stared down at him. They had watched a member of a species they considered weak and fragile push through tests that would have killed many of them. They had seen something that contradicted everything they believed. Stepped forward. For the first time in his 30-year career, he was uncertain what to say. "Cadet Cole, you have completed 4 of 5 modules in a single day cycle. Do you require rest before the combat simulation?" Danny looked up at the reptilian sergeant. His face was pale with exhaustion. His hands shook at his sides. Blood still dripped from his nose and ears. Every part of his body showed signs of damage. But his eyes remained steady. "How much time do I have before the day cycle ends?" 4 hours. Danny nodded slowly. "Then I have time, let us finish this." The combat simulation module was the Academy's final test of readiness. Every cadet who had ever attended 7 feared this test more than any other. It was not designed to measure success or failure in the traditional sense. The simulation was designed to be unbeatable. Cadets faced an adaptive combat program that studied their fighting style and adjusted to counter it. The program learned from every move, every attack, every defensive technique. It grew smarter and faster with each passing minute. Success was measured not in victory but in duration. The longer a cadet lasted, the higher their rating. The Academy record was held by a warrior named All, who had survived for 6 hours against the simulation before collapsing from exhaustion. That record had stood for 47 years. No cadet had ever come close to breaking it. No cadet had ever defeated the program outright, because it was designed to always find a way to win. Danny Cole stood at the entrance to the simulation chamber. Behind him, every observation window was packed with aliens watching. Director had moved from her office to the primary control room. Sergeants and stood at the main monitoring station, recording everything. The human had been awake for over 15 hours. He had completed 4 modules that should have taken 4 days. His body was covered in burns, bruises, and dried blood. Medical scanners showed that his muscles were damaged, his joints were inflamed, and his energy reserves were nearly depleted. Any reasonable being would have stopped. Any logical creature would have recognized that continuing was foolish and dangerous. Danny Cole walked into the simulation chamber without hesitation. The door sealed behind him, and the program activated. For the first hour, Danny fought defensively. The simulation started with basic combat scenarios. Single opponents attacked with predictable patterns. Weapons were simple, environments were straightforward. Danny conserved energy. He moved with the efficiency of someone who understood that endurance would matter more than raw strength. He blocked instead of dodging when blocking was easier. He avoided unnecessary movements. He let his opponents come to him instead of chasing them. Observed his strategy with growing respect. He is not fighting to win, he is fighting to survive. "He has done this before," replied. He knows that the simulation will escalate. He is saving his strength for what comes next. The second hour was harder. Multiple opponents attacked from different angles. Environmental hazards activated throughout the arena. Fire erupted from the floor. Walls shifted and moved. Gravity fluctuated without warning. Danny took hits. The simulation's attacks were designed to cause real pain, and his body was already damaged. Bruises bloomed across his arms and torso. His movements became slower as exhaustion crept deeper into his muscles. But he did not fall. Every time an attack knocked him down, he got back up. Every time the pain became too much, he pushed through it. His body had been telling him to quit for hours, but Danny had stopped listening long ago. In the third hour, something changed. Danny stopped playing defense. He had been watching the simulation carefully, studying its patterns, learning how it thought. Every combat program had underlying logic, predictable responses built into its framework. Danny had spent 3 hours looking for weaknesses. Now he began to exploit them. He noticed that drone squads always coordinated their attacks in the same sequence. Left, right, center, always in that order. When the next squad approached, Danny moved before they attacked. He struck the left drone first, destroying it before it could fire. Then he used its wreckage to shield himself from the right drone's shot while simultaneously firing at the center drone. The squad was destroyed in 4 seconds. "Impossible," whispered. "The program should have adapted to that." Leaned forward, his yellow eyes fixed on the human below. It did adapt, but he is thinking faster than it can adjust. Danny led pursuit units into environmental hazards. He baited the fire traps and dodged at the last second, letting his enemies burn in his place. He memorized the gravity fluctuation patterns and used them to throw his opponents off balance. At the 3-hour mark, he began deliberately showing weakness. He pretended to be more exhausted than he was, letting his movements become sloppy and slow. The simulation sensed victory and sent more aggressive opponents. Danny was waiting for them. He struck with precision that seemed impossible for someone in his condition. Every attack found its target. Every movement was exactly where it needed to be. The simulation threw everything it had at him, but Danny had stopped being reactive. He had become predictive. At 3 hours and 47 minutes, the combat simulation shut down. The chamber fell silent. Holographic opponents flickered and vanished into nothing. The environmental hazards deactivated. The gravity returned to normal. Danny stood alone in the center of the arena. He was breathing hard, covered in sweat and blood and bruises. Every part of him hurt in ways he could not even describe, but he was standing. Director's voice echoed through the station-wide announcement system. Combat simulation terminated. Victory condition achieved. Cadet Danny Cole of Earth has completed all 5 orientation modules in 19 hours and 23 minutes. This is unprecedented in the 300-year history of the Galactic Union Military Academy. The silence lasted for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the observation areas, someone began to clap. The sound was strange because most aliens did not clap, but they had learned the gesture from studying human culture. More aliens joined in. Soon, the entire station was filled with the sound of applause. Danny looked up at the observation windows, at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. Some of them had laughed at him when he arrived. Some of them had expected him to fail. None of them were laughing now. Slowly, Danny straightened his posture as much as his damaged body would allow. He raised his hand in a casual salute, the same way soldiers on Earth had been saluting for centuries. In the control room, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Send a message to Union Command. Tell them we need to revise our assessment of human capabilities." "What should I say?" Watched as Danny finally allowed himself to sit down on the arena floor. Exhaustion had finally claimed him now that the fight was over. Medical drones descended to treat his wounds, but even sitting there, even beaten and bloody and barely conscious, there was something in Danny Cole's eyes that made the ancient warrior feel something he had not felt in decades. Fear of the future. "Tell them," said slowly, "that we have underestimated humanity. Tell them that if the rest of their species is anything like this one, the galaxy will never be the same." Began composing the message. On the arena floor, Danny closed his eyes and finally allowed himself to rest. He had proven something today, not just to the aliens who had doubted him, but to himself. Humans were not weak. They were not fragile. They were survivors. And now the rest of the galaxy was starting to understand what that truly meant. The legend of Danny Cole had begun. But it was just the first chapter in a much longer story. A story about humanity's place among the stars and what they were truly capable of achieving. The galaxy would remember this day for a very long time.